Heather Cox Richardson, Democracy Awakening, Notes on the State of America. In Democracy Awakening, Notes on the State of America, Heather Cox Richardson takes readers on a compelling journey through the ideological battlegrounds that have shaped American democracy. The book delves into the roots of American conservatism and its evolution from opposition to the New Deal in the 1930s to the present-day polarization. Richardson sheds light on the turbulent shifts in political strategies, such as the Southern strategy and movement conservatism, which have influenced racial and socioeconomic dynamics. As you explore this summary, expect an insightful examination of how political rhetoric and historical narratives have been manipulated to undermine democratic ideals. From the Great Compression to the Great Divergence, and the alarming rise of authoritarianism during the Trump era, the book underscores the ongoing struggle for equality. Discover how history's distortions continue to impact today's democratic values, offering a clarion call for reclaiming America's true narrative of equality and democracy.
Erosion of Democracy. The enduring clash between conservative and liberal ideals in the United States traces back to pivotal moments in history, often depicted as a struggle for American values. The roots of American conservatism can be linked to the 1930s, where a coalition formed against President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal. This coalition comprised Republicans and Southern Democrats who were displeased with what they perceived as federal overreach, challenging traditional values like states' rights. Conservation efforts weren't always grounded in true ideological principles but rather used as political tools. In the years before World War II, ideologies like fascism drew interest from some U.S. politicians. Fascism's hierarchical beliefs stood in stark contrast to democratic values of equality, suggesting that only a select few should control the nation. This ideology temporarily resonated with certain Southern politicians within the Democratic coalition. However, after the attack on Pearl Harbor and the U.S.'s entry into World War II, fascism lost its appeal, and a liberal consensus began to dominate the post-war landscape. This liberal wave pushed for civil rights advancements, especially as non-white soldiers returned home after the war. President Truman's civil rights initiatives and landmark Supreme Court decisions like Brown v. Board of Education epitomized this progress. Yet, federal efforts for equality sparked backlash, leading figures like Alabama Governor George Wallace to champion a return to racial hierarchies. Movement conservatism emerged around this time, heavily influenced by thinkers like William F. Buckley, Jr. The political landscape shifted further in the 1960s with the rise of Richard Nixon, who harnessed the Southern strategy to gain support from disaffected Democrats by opposing segregation interventions. Nixon's era marked the emergence of an authoritarian streak, polarizing voters and capitalizing on revisionist narratives of U.S. history. Despite the economic uplift known as the Great Compression, which saw rising middle-class prosperity, Nixon's presidency is often overshadowed by the Watergate scandal and undemocratic actions. Entering the presidency in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan's political rhetoric signified another shift. Although his methods broadened appeal, the movement conservatives continued to reshape democracy. Resistance from the public persisted through the 80s and 90s, yet conservatives successfully introduced voter suppression laws and influenced the Supreme Court's ideology, falsely framing the U.S. foundation on states' rights and racial hierarchies. The start of the new millennium witnessed a polarized nation, heightened by the Tea Party's rise following Barack Obama's presidency in 2009. This group sought a return to a mythical past reflecting their distorted view of the founding fathers' values. Republicans ramped up gerrymandering efforts through projects like Operation Red Map, skewing power in congressional elections to favor their agendas. Masterminds like Mitch McConnell embraced obstructionism, further deepening mistrust in democratic processes. The concerted efforts to distort democratic norms and amplify divides hinted at an experimental flirtation with authoritarianism that continues to affect the political fabric today. The Escalator Descent. On June 16, 2015, Donald Trump graced the world with a showmanship-style entry, descending the golden escalator in Trump Tower to announce his presidential bid. At this time, the Republican Party, buoyed by their control of the Senate, sought a charismatic leader to champion their message that Democrats were a lurking danger. Enter Trump, whose candidacy brought more than anticipated, resonating strongly with a demographic yearning for an America defined by racial, gender, and religious hierarchies. The 2016 election cycle was a whirlwind that confounded the nation, and Trump's eventual victory marked a seismic shift in America's political landscape. Despite receiving a minority of the popular vote, his administration embarked on an agenda to dismantle active government functions, challenging the nation's foundational democratic principles. This offensive included the unsettling introduction of alternative facts, a strategy deliberately employed to manipulate public perception through misinformation. Compounding domestic uncertainties, there was also Russia's meddling in the election, raising alarms about democracy's vulnerability to authoritarian influences. Social media platforms became the battlegrounds where misinformation thrived, driving wedges between citizens on critical societal issues. Trump's divisive agenda manifested vividly on August 11, 2017, when Charlottesville, Virginia, became the stage for a chilling display of right-wing extremism. Under the rallying call of Unite the Right, groups like racists, neo-Nazis, and white nationalists marched openly, culminating in violence that claimed the life of counter-protester Heather Heyer. The events demonstrated the real-world impacts of Trump's divisive rhetoric. Equally alarming was the attempt to rewrite American history to propagate a narrative aligning with white Christian nationalism, reminiscent of antebellum ideologies. The State Department's Commission on Inalienable Rights sought to reshape historical narratives, posing a profound threat to democratic values. Of particular concern was the presidency's assault on the electoral process, most notably in the tumultuous lead-up to January 6. Trump's calls to delay and undermine election results were unprecedented, culminating in the "Stop the Steal" movement, a dangerous cocktail of false narratives and authoritarian muscle-flexing that preceded the shocking attack on the U.S. Capitol. Far from an isolated incident, this assault was the climax of long-fueled lies steeped in white supremacy. In an authoritarian play, Trump perpetuated the "big lie" of election fraud, forging it into a rallying cry for a Republican Party purging dissenters and further unraveling democratic ideals. This relentless pursuit of power threatens voting and civil rights, gnawing at the core of American democracy. As we navigate these turbulent times, there lies an urgent need to confront the distorted narratives spun by political factions and to reclaim a true understanding of American history, one that embraces democratic equality over divisive myths. America's democratic paradox. What fascinates in the story of America is its turbulent journey toward embracing true democratic equality. Despite its founding credo of equality, the birth of the nation is tangled in contradictions, with the founders themselves owning enslaved people and holding certain communities as lesser. This paradox forms the backdrop as we explore the nation's evolution. The seeds of change were planted after the 7 Years' War in 1763, leaving Britain financially shattered. As King George III pressed for harsh taxes on the American colonies, a sense of injustice brewed. The colonists' desire for equality ignited revolutionary fervor, culminating in the rallying cry for independence led by the Sons of Liberty and eventually, the Declaration of Independence. However, the fledgling nation's first attempt at governance, the Articles of Confederation, faltered under decentralized power, leading to financial despair. The U.S. Constitution emerged as the savior, cementing federal authority while safeguarding against authoritarianism. Its most notable innovation is its adaptability. Through amendments, it promises a governance that grows with the nation's evolving needs. Crucially, the Constitution enshrines the protection of rights, yet grapples with the profound contradiction of endorsing equality while many framers perpetuated enslavement. This contradiction wielded a destructive force on democracy, compounded by Southern leaders who capitalized on slavery's profits and propagated a narrative upholding states' rights and white supremacy. By the mid-19th century, these forces threatened to extend slavery into the expanding Western territories, a prospect that spurred Abraham Lincoln to enter the political arena. Lincoln, through his presidency and amidst the Civil War, decisively abolished slavery while enhancing federal authority. Yet the ideal closure to these turbulent times was disrupted by his assassination, leaving Reconstruction to languish under President Johnson's lenient policies toward the old Confederate Guard. A revisionist history began to flourish, muddying the path toward democracy. Despite the setbacks, the march toward equality saw significant strides as the nation approached the 20th century. Progressive movements gained momentum, with women securing voting rights and revolutionary ideas emerging across education and labor. Economic disparities began to narrow, and civil rights advanced, signaling an era where the principle of inclusive democracy increasingly took center stage. In this historical narrative lies an enduring lesson: America's true essence is tied to the perpetual fight for equality and the active defense of democratic principles. Lincoln's call to vigilance resonates today, as he cautioned against those cloaked as conservatives but driven by radical intentions threatening democracy itself. Only by embracing these democratic ideals can America aim for a genuine new birth of freedom, cementing its promise of equality for all.
Heather Cox Richardson's Democracy Awakening is a timely exploration of the ongoing challenges faced by American democracy. The summary highlights the intricate history of political maneuvering and ideological shifts from the 1930s to the Trump presidency, revealing the persistent tug-of-war between conservative and liberal values. As the book traces the rise of movement conservatism and its impact on the perceived erosion of democratic principles, it becomes clear that the fight for equality is far from over. The narrative culminates in a reminder of America's founding contradictions and the enduring potential for genuine democratic progress. Richardson urges readers to recognize the importance of historical accuracy and civic engagement in shaping a future that honors the true spirit of democracy. This summary encapsulates a vital reminder that, despite attempts to distort history, the principles of freedom and equality remain the cornerstone of America's democratic potential.